It's those two words that don't seem to fit again: godly feminism. But they do. They go together perfectly if you're looking at it through the Bible view. That's what we're trying to do here in this channel. We're trying to explore the truth here at Average Christian, just to understand that in the context of what it means to have a real relationship with God. In this part 2 to godly feminism, that's what we're trying to do here, is value women and see how God sees you, ladies, men, to help us to understand better as well, so that we don't mistreat, misunderstand, or misappreciate, or whatever the word is there. So we see each other properly. And so we looked at in the first video the value of a woman, and this video is talking about rights and some of those aspects as well. I'm Zach. This is, once again, The Average Christian. I'm inviting you to subscribe if you haven't already. That helps us out and gets the message out even further. That's all we're trying to do here. And to hit the notification bell to keep up when new content comes out, and also check us out on social media and various other places as well. And we're glad that you're here. The whole idea, again, is to see this relationship with God through truth, through looking at practicality. How can I use this in an everyday setting? Because that's where Christianity is lived, not in church buildings, and by dispelling myths about Christianity. Let's get into it. So we looked at the value of a woman. There is a certain role that God has. He's made for men and women, and they are to work together like puzzle pieces, and they have to be understood properly, used properly. The first time I think I watched that video this morning, and the first part of this, and I looked like I was scared. Maybe so, because I don't want to be offensive. And some of these are sort of touchy subjects as well. When you start talking about who's over who and who has the authority and so forth, and using words like submission, some people in our culture get a little tense about those things. No need to be, though. When we look at the Bible as our source of truth, I trust God that he created everything the way it absolutely should be. If I read this and go by it, it's going to be perfect, same as if you do it. Now, talking about women and their rights, I sort of stopped there, because as a Christian, the more and more I read, the less and less I'm comfortable talking about rights for anybody. It's big when you're talking in terms of government policy. What are my rights now with gun control? What are our Second Amendment rights? And I believe in those things, but I volunteered to be a slave, and hopefully you have as well. Sounds odd, but that's really what this is. And I view myself as a servant, and it becomes more and more uncomfortable to talk about rights. So I say that to help give a little more of a bigger picture view of the rights of women. But they are deserving. You are deserving, ladies, to be considered equal in value. I'm not going to dive in too much, except to sort of blow you up as far as the way the Bible looks at you and what you bring to the table. But everybody intrinsically has value, because we're created in the image of God. And so just because there are differences, it's funny how society plays on that, and society classifies in so many different ways. And really, there's only two that matter to God, and that's right or wrong. And he wants everyone to be right. So am I right with him? And even though there are differences, those are to be celebrated and appreciated more so than looked at as dividing lines. Same with women and how we see them, to be treasured for who God made you to be. If you can see yourself, ladies, the way that God sees you, you will never need anyone else's approval. You will never need anyone else's attention, in so many words. But to be approved by God, valued by God, is absolutely fulfilling. She was designed to help. I got into Adam and Eve last time. You have been designed to help man. There is nobody else in the world that can do for a man the way that you can, that can, once again, complete him, be what he lacks. And I won't bore you. I'd love to do it for my wife's sake, to tell you how many ways that she completes me. And it's so funny how different we are, and yet how much I rely on her and have relied on her, how much she has helped me change and how much she has helped me grow. So many people, because of my wife's physical condition now, only see me. And I have to tell them over and again how I don't have the man that's sitting right here And you wouldn't be listening to the man that's sitting here unless it was for her. And I could go on and on and on, but maybe for another time, I'll have to do a segment dedicated to Laura. But she was designed and to help me. Women are designed to help men be the best that they possibly can be, and vice versa. It goes the same way from the other perspective. She has been given gifts for service. I talked about the honor of what it means to be submissive in a marriage relationship, the honor of being a servant. That's how God honors us. It doesn't sound honorable because we're listening to what the world says about being a servant, but there's nothing more honorable you can do than to give yourself up for somebody else. By the way, if you don't know this already, when you look at the Greek word for this kind of love, the love that God has for us and the love that he wants reciprocated, that word is agape in the Greek. And what's behind that word is sacrificing self for the better of the object of that love. But you can't honor anybody in a better way than to absolutely give yourself up completely. It's how marriage works. You hear people say, marriage is 50-50. No, it isn't. It's 100-100. I've got to give 100 and do the very best I can be, whether she is or is not. That's my role. That's what I vowed to be, and so forth. So there is this relationship that God has designed, and you ladies have been given the gifts to be servants, given gifts of being compassionate, being better suited for so many things that men are just not good at. Maybe it's cliche to go to Proverbs 31, but I'm going to go there for just a little bit and read you a few verses because, ladies, you're irreplaceable. There's nobody that can do and be what you are. Proverbs chapter 31 and verse 10, it's interesting that it's the king's mother here who is explaining these things as well. An excellent wife who can find? She is far more precious than jewels. What can I tell you from personal experience? I'm going to have to just talk more about my wife here because I didn't know. I just didn't know that it was that important. You hear things that are important, but as a young, dumb teenage guy, remember our brains don't fully develop till we're 25, married at 20 years old, and a father not long after that. I just didn't know how important it was to have someone who's godly, to have an excellent wife. I have that. And I really say this a lot of times sort of tongue in cheek, but I mean it, that God was looking out for me. He knew how ignorant I was. He knew how much help I needed. And he sent Laura basically to save me in a lot of ways. You can't replace that. You can't put a value on that. That's exactly what it says here. She is far more precious than jewels. Proverbs 31 and verse 12, 2 verses later, she does him good and not harm all the days of her life. If you live to what God made you to be, not what the feminist group over here says you should be and the value that they try to place on you, or what this group says or what anybody else says, if you do it God's way, you do him good and never any harm all the days of your life. Proverbs 31 and verse 15, she rises while it is yet night, provides food for her household and portions for her maidens. There are things that men, it's Kobe Bryant who passed away just this week as we're recording this, just Sunday. And when you see Kobe talking in speeches and receiving awards, when he retired, he's thanking his wife, Vanessa, because there's no way he could have done those things and had a family of 6 without her being that backbone there and being that rock that's looked down on so many times. But look here, providing food for her household, portions for her maidens. She takes care, she nurtures, and nobody else is better suited to do this like a woman is. Proverbs 31 and verse 17, she dresses herself with strength and makes her arms strong. Maybe it's not celebrated as much. I think more so in our culture now it is, and it's distorted in many ways. But the strength of a woman, I'm going to show you in a passage a little later, it's immeasurable. Proverbs 31 and verse 20, she opens her hand to the poor and reaches out her hands to the needy because she is compassionate, because she cares. We as men are more gruff and less compassionate, and we are not as apt to be thoughtful. And here it talks about those exact qualities that make women so much better in these aspects. Proverbs 31 and verse 23, her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. because of her, because of what she's doing, whether it's behind the scenes, out front, whatever the case is. He's known, and he's able to be known because of her strength and her influence. Proverbs 31:26, she opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. If I was going to use words to describe my wife, wisdom would be one of them. And to be in her early 40s, she has traits that her dad had as well. But I can't tell you how many people that know her well enough have known and have wanted to just sit with her and talk to her because of her approach, because of the way she sees things, the wisdom that comes with it. And she wouldn't think any of these things. In fact, this may embarrass her as well. But I know people who have sought her out just to hear her take. My children, especially. My children, there are so many things my wife is unable to do and wishes she could do. And there are so many people who compliment on our children and who they are and who they've become. And some of those people know that they are in large part a result of her teaching, her training, all of these things that are mentioned here, because she was at home raising those children while I was out doing other things that maybe were more glamorous, that got more attention. And all the while she's raising our children with this wisdom and this kindness. Proverbs 31:28, her children rise up and call her blessed. Ask any one of my kids about their mother and just be prepared to listen. Her husband also, and he praises her. Doing so now as proof. Verse 30, same chapter, Proverbs 31, charm is deceitful, beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. So many women who want women's rights and who want women to be pushed up in an unhealthy way and looked at in an unhealthy way, still subscribe to this vanity that is beauty and define women by this, and let other people define them by physical beauty and attraction and these charms and so forth, which are fleeting. It says charm is deceitful, which are not her defining qualities, but they are still using women in this way in advertising. Watch and see how many women are used in these ways with their charm, with their beauty, to sell movies, to sell products and so forth. But a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Women deserve to have, this thing's going to run on for a little bit, so just bear with me. This is going to be a little long. Women deserve to have their thoughts heard, period. I know of a practice, I'm going to tell you, where in some of the congregations, churches where I've been, they don't have elders. And if you don't know the Bible well, elders were put in place to lead and shepherd the flock. That's essentially what they do. They're overseers. Well, in some congregations where you don't have men who are available to serve in that capacity, they've come up with the brilliant idea of men's business meetings. Tongue firmly planted in cheek here. Men's business meeting, which means the men are all going to get together and sit down and, did I just say get down? They're going to get together and sit down and make all the decisions. Now, why do you think church buildings are usually such ugly colored carpet, ugly colored pews, ugly colored walls? Because a bunch of men thought it would be a good idea for them to discuss how much the paint would cost. Let's get the cheapest version and we'll figure it all out. Terrible idea. And so women are sort of, I can't tell you how many times I've been in these meetings and you come back out and the wives are waiting and they've been sitting out there talking and their thoughts and their points not even being listened to or heard. So it's a terrible idea. If you men are out there and you're part of these business meetings, challenge those things and just have congregational meetings and start listening to women who have so much to offer. It was Pilate who should have listened to his wife. Matthew 27:19, besides, while he was sitting in the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, have nothing to do with that righteous man, she said, for I have suffered much because of him today in a dream. How much he would have benefited from listening to her advice. It was Zipporah who had to set Moses straight. All God dealing with Moses and Moses' his excuses, and he's finally got it all together, and Aaron's going to speak for him. He got it all worked out, and Moses finally agrees to go down to Egypt to bring God's people out, and he's going to be the leader of leaders amongst the children of Israel, all of God's people. And on the way, God stops to kill somebody. It's either going to be Moses' son or Moses. It doesn't really make it clear. but somebody's going to die because their son has not been circumcised yet, which is absolutely necessary. At a lodging place in Exodus 4, on the way, the Lord met him and sought to put him to death. And Zipporah took a flint, a rock, this is painful to read, a flint, and cut off her son's foreskin and touched Moses' feet with it and said, surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me. So he let him alone. It was then that she said a bridegroom of blood because of the circumcision, because she had to step in and do and had the thoughtfulness to realize what the problem was here to keep somebody from dying in this situation because of what Moses hadn't taken care of. Lydia was the first European convert at the beginning of the church at Philippi. In Acts chapter 16, you can read about. It was Jesus who chose women to be the first to discover his resurrection. And this is so opposite of Jewish culture because their testimony in court, if you will, with legality was so lowly and regarded. And it was women who first discovered Jesus, that empty tomb that Jesus was in. This is the one I was talking about, getting to the power of women, especially as wives. She can turn her husband and change his life, even change his eternity without saying a thing. 1 Peter chapter 3, let me read this for you, verses 1-6. Likewise, wives, be subject to your own husbands, so that even if some do not obey the word, when they may be won without a word by their conduct of their wives. When they see your respectful and pure conduct, do not let your adorning be external. Really, it should be merely external, the braiding of hair and the putting on of gold jewelry or the clothing you wear, but let your adorning be the hidden person of the heart with the imperishable beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which in God's sight is very precious. All quiet and gentle, that means to be meek. That means you should be seen and not heard, or however disrespectful way people want to look at this. Notice the phrase that follows here, which is very, in God's sight, is very precious. For this is how the holy women who hoped in God used to adorn themselves by submitting to their own husbands, as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord. And you are her children if you do good and do not fear anything that is frightening. So let me wrap this up. These two videos, you can go back and watch the first one if you didn't catch it already. Women should appreciate the following: who made them, how they are made, who they were designed to be, and their value without the comparisons and the contrast. Women should be appreciated, respected for all the same reasons. I was reading that verse before I cut off. I wanted to mention one person. There was Willeen Howell, who I got to meet in South Mississippi, who had been married to her husband, Huey, for 30 plus years. And the day Huey, I was told, this was before I got there, the day Huey walked into a church building, it shocked his whole family. People who were there couldn't believe that he had walked into a church building. But she prayed, she set the example for well over 30 years. And because of that example, he was led to Christ, he obeyed the gospel, and as far as I know, he was faithful to God till his death. And it was because of this very thing right here. So tell me a woman isn't powerful in the role God designed her to be. Tell me that it doesn't work. Tell me that she has to be something else that these other groups are saying she has to be before she can find meaning. Tell me that there's no real value of keeping her in the home to raise children, to run the household. And I won't believe you, because this disagrees. Ladies, I hope this has helped. Men, I hope this has helped you to appreciate. It helps me to appreciate my wife, my daughters, my mother, women all around. Thanks for watching the video.